Thanks for listening. Every time you listen, you are a blessing and encouragement to us as we leave the legacy of faith by journaling through the Bible. This is episode 443, season 1 of the Family Bible Journey Old Testament podcast. Today we're looking at the Song of Solomon, chapters 3 and 4. The title of today's podcast is Captivated by Love. And our key verses for today are a section of chapter 4 in verses 9 to 16, where Solomon describes some of his infatuation with his young bride. You have captivated my heart, my sister, my bride. You have captivated my heart with one glance of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace. How beautiful is your love, my sister, my bride. How much better is your love than wine, and the fragrance of your oils than any spice. Your lips drip nectar, my bride. Honey and milk are under your tongue. The fragrance of your garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon. A garden locked is my sister, my bride, a spring locked, a fountain sealed. Your shoots are an orchard of pomegranates, with all choicest fruits, henna, with nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with trees of all frankincense, myrrh and aloes, with all choice spices. A garden fountain, a well of living water, and flowing streams from Lebanon. Awake, O north wind, and come, O south wind. Blow upon my garden, let its spices flow. She responds, let my beloved come to his garden and eat its choicest fruits. This is the word of the Lord. So in this section, in these verses, indeed throughout the book of the Song of Solomon, there are going to be many sensual descriptions of the intimacy that Solomon enjoys with this, his young and beloved bride. And I would suggest that it is very hard, nearly impossible for us to imagine, in this case, where Solomon compares being with his beloved to walking in a garden filled with all sorts of aromatic trees and plants and flowers and spices. It is hard for us to understand what he is saying because we just don't have any way to relate to it in our modern context. And the reality is that we live in a world where much of our technology, many of our conveniences are designed to put space and barriers and protections between us and the natural world that we live in. I mean, we live in climate-controlled houses. We drive around in climate-controlled cars. We have to put sunscreen on to just venture outside, or bug spray. And the parts of the world that most of us live in that are listening to this podcast, they can't even come close to matching the biodiversity and the abundance of the different trees and spices and fruits and plants and flowers that grow naturally in the Holy Land, where Solomon was king of it all. And young King Solomon, he undoubtedly explored his kingdom all the way up to Damascus, all the way down into Egypt. He was Lord of everything that he saw. And even if he wasn't directly the king of it, he was accepted as a leader among the nations. And so he is describing for us many plants that were native to that part of the world, that the only place that most of us are ever going to experience even an ounce of their beauty is bottled up in a jar that we buy at the grocery store to put into our food. Or maybe you buy some potpourri and it's got some of these spices, some of this bark, some of these leaves dried up that you can put it in your house and perfume your house. See, we just can't even begin to understand and appreciate how beautiful these gardens of Solomon were. He was a vine dresser. He knew everything that there was to know about plants and cultivation. And so you could believe that his gardens, his choicest gardens, the gardens that he planted for his palaces and his fortresses, they were a beauty to behold. They would pleasure all of your senses. The colors of the flowers, the smell of the flowers and the fruits, the taste of the produce, the different textures, the soft lily, the rough bark of a tree, the savory flavor of freshly picked olives, the sound of birds singing sweetly in the air that was filled with every wonderful fragrance that you could imagine. This is how Solomon describes his love metaphorically and poetically for his beloved, and it truly was a blessing, not only for them to experience for others, but also for others to behold. And this is the highlight for me of preaching at the wedding of a young couple that is in love and full of excitement and joy and optimism and hope for the future, that we, who may or may not experience this sort of love to the depth that Solomon describes it here, can see glimmers and glimpses of God's love in the innocent, pure, beautiful, wonderful, and mysterious blessing of young love. And I do have a couple of notes that I want to share with you from these chapters before we get to our blessing for the day. One is on chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. My note simply there is absence makes the heart grow fonder, especially as Solomon's beloved describes her longing for her husband. Another note on chapter 3, verse 4, where it says, true love never lets go, as she describes her pursuit of him and seeking him out when he was nowhere to be found. I have also a note on chapter 4, particularly in verse 7, where it says simply, love sees what it wants to see. I used to have a note that said love is blind, but the reality is that love isn't just blind. Love has this crazy and uncanny propensity and power for us to see what we want to see in someone that we love. And that is referenced here in this passage. And then 3 additional notes on chapter 4. In verse 9, it says that an innocent glance was enough to make Solomon's heart leap when he describes being captivated with the fluttering of her eyes. Verse 10, love is seductive. You could also say love is intoxicating. And then in verse 14, a personal note to me, when it describes many of the spices that were growing in Solomon's garden that were filling the air with their beautiful scent, and that is saffron. Saffron is a spice that is sometimes hard to get. It's very expensive here in the States, but when you are in Israel, it's pretty cheap. It's pretty easy to get, and I've had many people on my tours go and prioritize buying a huge bottle of saffron there because it's so much cheaper in their spice markets than it is here in the States for whatever reason. And I had a great friend. He was a Muslim friend of mine. He actually came to Christ shortly before his death. His name was Naeem. He owned a restaurant. It was called the Mediterranean Grill. It was on the west side of Indianapolis. And Naeem was a close personal friend of mine for many years. I spent lots of time enjoying his Turkish coffee. Had the best Turkish coffee that I have ever had anywhere. I'm not kidding, on this side of the Atlantic. And he also, when we would bring our kids there to his restaurant to celebrate birthdays, because it became for quite a few years the place that our kids would want to go for their birthday meal. We let the kids choose a restaurant to go to for their birthday celebration. And they would choose, of course, well, I always chose the Mediterranean Grill, and they got to be choosing it too. But he would bring out a special dessert. I think it's called domates. I'm probably butchering that one, but whatever, because we had a different name for it. It was called honey-coated balls of joy. These little donuts, freshly fried, coated in honey and saffron, and then dusted with powdered sugar. Unbelievable. Probably something I imagine that we're going to get to enjoy in heaven. It was just so good. So very bad for you. So high in sugar and saturated fats. But you know what? Sometimes none of that stuff matters. You just got to lose yourself in the moment. And so for me, to see saffron mentioned here and to know the savory sweetness of that spice and to have that memory triggered, it's a powerful memory for me. And it is a vibrant and meaningful detail of this text that I wanted to share with you so that you too, even if you've never been blessed to enjoy honey-coated balls of joy, to know that this is just a profound and deep and very meaningful way that Solomon here is describing the beauty and the intoxication of the love of his beloved. Lots of these sorts of illustrations are peppered through this text, and we continue to explore them in our next Old Testament episode. Thanks for listening to the Family Bible Journey podcast. If you'd like to help us get the good word out, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. Also, if you'd like to make a financial contribution, all donations are tax deductible, and I receive zero compensation from this podcast, so that everything you give goes directly to the work that God has given us to do in sharing this journey of journaling through the Bible. Our blessing for today. May you seek true love that is based upon appreciation, respect, and commitment, never settling for the cheap substitutes this world sells. Amen.